by nature, but since I had COVID, my sleep pattern is destroyed. So I have to make myself sleep now. It's terrible, but I'm getting better.
And that was over a year ago for you now, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I have, what do
Wow.
they call it? After effects?
Yes. What is that called?
Yeah, it's a term for that.
Yeah. But wow, that's
We're
a whole
live.
story in itself.
We're live.
All right.
Well, that's awesome. So that you all know that we're live, and we just want to welcome you to the Blue Wave Conversation Show for this week. And I'm just trying to get one more post up for us, and that would take me about 1 more minute or less, because I'm a little quick like that. So we should
Want
be
to send
good.
the link? If you send the link, I can then to my Twitter account.
Okay, I can, it's actually on my page, but I will send it to you by messenger.
Perfect.
I sent it to both.
Hi, everyone. So good to be here with you. How many people are on?
Not sure. But so what I wanted to do first is to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. This is an extension, a part 2 to our talk that we had last week, which was on the mental state of America. And so what we're going to talk to you all tonight is about racial trauma and stress. I'm sure we're going to pivot off and do some other things as we normally do, but I wanted to welcome to the show Vanessa Maddox. Hey, Vanessa.
Hey, everybody.
How you doing? Say hey to the people.
Hello, Jamie.
Tell them what's been going on in your life this week real quick.
Oh, one more.
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, everything wonderful has been going on in my life this week. Life is great. I'm alive. I'm healthy. I can talk. I can see. And I have these wonderful ladies on the show tonight to talk about this very important topic. Life is good.
Life is good. Life is good. And Jamie came in and she left. So I think she's having a little bit of Wi-Fi trouble. So let's keep Jamie in our prayers tonight. I think she's coming back on. So I am Mary Hayes, and we're part of the Real Housewives. We were the Real Suburban Housewives for Biden Harris. I just want all of you to know now we are the Suburban Women for American Democracy. And there she is, Jamie. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, can you hear me? Hey, everybody. Sorry, my sound was not working. It was no good. Hey, everybody.
Good. So how are you?
No,
Tell me how you've been doing this week, real quick. We never get to talk to you guys.
Oh, I am excellent. My boyfriend is here from Seattle.
Well, we'll make it a quick show.
Well, she's like, by the way, I'm doing great this week.
Yeah, I'm doing great, and he's hot. So,
well, we'll make it a quick show for you tonight.
I don't think you can say that without pulling him on.
Yeah, kind of. I've seen pictures, but
I mean,
you guys want to see him?
Yes.
Yes.
You can't. Yeah.
This is him.
Oh, hi. Welcome to the East Coast.
He said, welcome to the East Coast. He can't hear anything.
Oh.
Well, tell him we said he looks hot.
They said you look hot.
Thank you.
Oh, he's like, thank you. Oh. At least he didn't say I know.
He's a keeper.
Yeah.
That'd make it hard for you.
Oh my gosh. So tonight we have Monica Belton, who is with us for the very, very first time. And returning with us is Dr. Grant Tower. Say hi. And we're going to have Dr. Grant really take a minute to introduce Monica to the people. She's a part of our group already, but she has some really great insight on our topic tonight. So Dr. Grant, if you wouldn't mind doing the honors.
Sure. So Monica Belton, we'll just call her Monica, received her master's degree in social work from Arizona State University, and has been working with children and families for 19 years. Everyone, doesn't she look great?
Wonderful.
Everybody,
That's impressive since she's 29 years old.
isn't that amazing?
She has been a social worker with several organizations in North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Virginia. She's also a certified trauma and resilience professional in education. Mrs. Belton is an advocate and activist for social justice and mental health awareness. She serves as a board member for PBS NewsHour Extra and has presented on issues of mental health, suicide, and equity, which comes right into play with our topic tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Definitely. We are so glad to have you. And also, Monica was on another show with me a couple months ago, actually. It was, I can't remember the month. It probably was what, November? October?
I want to say it was before that because it was much in the heat of the Black Lives Matter movement.
True.
The recent Black Lives, I don't want to take away from anything that has already been done, but it was much in the heat of that. So I want to say it was probably before November. Maybe it was around September or August.
Yeah, probably. You know what? It's hard to believe that this has been going on this long, and it's hard for me to believe how long it's been since I've started doing this kind of, this kind of effort. So we want to dive in real quick and just talk a little bit about the racial trauma that we go through in America. And, the real thing that someone mentioned to me this week was that although I know the different things that, I've dealt with, and I've mentioned it before on the show, just dealing with our kids. Vanessa, I know you can relate because you have 2 boys as well. Just being a Black mother of 2 Black sons. And I know people hear it all the time, but they don't really understand it. And so you and I were talking before, and my passion has been that we have to have these conversations, because if we don't have the conversations, we don't know how, we won't know how to, I guess I should say, we won't know how to express it or have other people receive what we are experiencing and feeling. Case in point, I've had so many people that are not Black, some of my friends who are white, and they would ask me questions, and I actually got tagged by a couple of my friends who were Black because they've been approached and they've been battling on social media, talking about what was happening with Black Lives Matter, to the point where I heard a lot of Black people say that they were tired answering the questions. And so how do we deal with that? Because you have Black people, and Vanessa, feel free to piggyback on this because I'm sure you'll have a deeper insight. How do you deal with being a Black woman, dealing with what we see in the news and how it's portrayed, and trying to, dealing with our friends who are not Black, they are white, or, whatever races they are, but they have questions. And we're so beat down because we're dealing with the questions, we're dealing with our kids, we're dealing with trying to protect, and now we have to educate. Am I the only one sentencing this? Which, Monica, Vanessa?
Absolutely not. I think that's the story that we're all dealing with right now. I also have two Black sons. Who, yeah, 11 and 15.
Okay.
And one of them is playing Fortnite across the hall, so you might hear him periodically screaming his head off.
Yeah,
I hear him.
Mine is playing Call of Duty. So
yeah, one or the other. But I feel like that has been the story since they were born, right? For us, because we know already. But I think that now, especially with their access to social media, there was no hiding what was going on in March, April, May, June, July, August last year for them. Even my youngest one, everyone was talking about it. If they weren't talking about it in school, their friends had somebody who knew somebody that watched the news, watched social media, saw what was going on. And so being able to hide my fear and anxiety that I was heightened feeling with what was going on, after the murder of George Floyd, even after Ahmaud Arbery, they went on that walk with me. You know, we were walking for 223. We were doing that walk, and I was explaining to them what was going on, and I had to guard my anxiety for them because I don't want them to fear being outside, being around, being able to walk down the street. At the same time, knowing the society that we live in, that there has to be a certain amount of caution that they're going to have to hold. And we're not at a place where we can pretend that that's not a real thing. So that in itself is exhausting. Then you have also having to build them up from what society tells them that they are, which is what we've been doing since birth, before they were born, being prepared to make sure that our young men know that they come from lands of kings and queens and not what the society tells them that they are. And then when we're talking about educating people, I always tell people, if you don't have the time, the energy, and the patience, pass them on to a website. Yeah. Because unless someone's coming to you with true earnest, wanting to really understand Black Lives Matter movement, wanting to really understand racism, wanting to really understand Black lives, if they're not coming with that energy, no matter what you say, it's going to be exhausting. Having to explain what a microaggression is when you've experienced them 30 times a day for your entire life. If I explain it to you once and you don't get it, it's going to be exhausting. So I always advise people, if you don't have the time, the energy, or you don't feel like the person is really coming at you with really wanting to understand, they need to want to understand. Otherwise, it's going to be an argument. Because a lot of people come with that energy too, right? Especially on social media. Well, I don't understand this. Somebody explain systemic racism to me because I don't see it. I'm not going to be the one to do that. You know, they can look that up. They can Google it. Or they can watch one of Mary's shows on YouTube, right?
Right.
Right. There's other resources out there.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I remember, Vanessa, you and I had a conversation. Monica, you and I probably need to connect a little bit more than we have been. But I remember specifically having a conversation with Vanessa about being exhausted. You mentioned that, Monica, but I specifically remember because I was getting questioned and willfully so. I didn't mind it, but you're right, Monica. You have to kind of discern if this is coming, what place is this person coming from? Because Vanessa had mentioned that to me in the beginning, and she was like, I'm just exhausted. And I was like, I am too. I was like, but if I don't take the time to tell them, who will? And I did that to the point of exhaustion. So now I understand what Vanessa was trying to tell me before. I kept doing what I was doing because I felt I had to. But when I reached that point of exhaustion, at least I knew what that was because I had that previous conversation with Vanessa. Do you have anything to add to that? Because I know we're not the only ones that feel that exhaustion.
Is that for me? Or Monica? So at this day and age in this year, the first thing I would suggest is that every Black and brown person in America, we're just dealing with America right now. We can't go outside its borders yet because we got a lot of issues here. But every Black and brown person in America should have a therapist. Every single one. Absolutely. And we should be talking to that therapist about just surviving in our skin every day. Not even talking about the microaggressions and the Karenism at work. All right. I'm going through a significant Karen episode right now. And it's discouraging, it's exhausting, it's terrible. And it's only because I'm being my little old bright me. I'm just being myself. And my light shines very brightly. I know it. I know I have a strong presence. I know I walk into rooms and take them over, but that's just what I do. So if you can't handle that, then that's your problem. Don't try to slight me at work because you can't be like me. That's real, guys. I'm not joshing.
No, I know.
It's real. And so when I told Mary a few weeks ago that I was exhausted, you know what I wanted to do? I wanted to drop everything that I do in this world and go home, curl up, and just work and come home. That's it.
So one of the things I
didn't want to serve the public and serve women and serve Black people and serve marginalized people anymore, because a lot of times I feel like nobody else is hearing me and nobody else is offering to help. Mary, Monica.
We hear you.
Yep.
well, I think one of the issues is
that's where I am with it right now. And listen, it's a day-to-day thing, day by day.
Yeah.
So for the Karens in the audience who don't know they're Karens, it isn't just the talk to the manager haircut. How would you say that people can self-identify when they're Karening if they don't have the haircut? If I can't look in the mirror and see John and Kate haircut, say, because that's one of the things I've seen is I think white women, we are really good at knowing when men talk over us and when men interrupt us. And I think we saw that in a most poignant way at the debate between former Vice Presidents Pence and Vice President Harris, is that, I noticed a lot of white women talking about how they identified with Vice President Harris, when really we should identified with the white moderator who was letting all this go down. So how do we self-identify when we're Karening?
So I'm looking up, there is a white privilege checklist.
Ooh.
And I think that has been, yes.
It's a checklist?
It's a checklist. God. It was, and of course, I'm looking it up because I know it was from a book. And in there, it's something like 46 different items of things that white people say or things that white people experience that differ from people of color. And it's eye-opening for the white people that I have seen look at this checklist and go, wait, that is me. Yes, I can walk to a store and find magazines with people who look like me. Yes, I can walk into a job and never be the only person of my color in a room. Like, it's that kind of checklist. And I think, and again, the person has to be eyes open already. Right? Because anybody could look at that checklist and be like, that's dumb. Who wrote this? A true Karen would never even associate themselves with that list. The list would be garbage before you even read it. Right? So there's that. But somebody who was really wanted to look and say, I wonder if I'm part of oppressing people, could look at that list and say, oh, that is me. Oh, I do that. So as soon as I find it, I guess I can't put it in the chat. Can I put it in the chat? Is that how it works?
Yeah, a little
okay.
I think one thing that we do need to talk about then, and Jamie talks about this all the time, is how to be an ally as a white person for Black people.
And how not to be caping, because I see a lot of performative allyship, both in organizations and by individuals, and a lot of caping. And people are more than happy to put that Black Lives Matter filter on their Facebook photo, but they're still concerned about, if a Black family's moving in down the street.
I literally have a course on BIPOC allyship. And so I know I could tell you a couple of things, because number one, we were talking in the beginning about about being exhausted. So actually, Vanessa, what I do, and I'm lucky to, and I started typing in there, I'll finish it in a minute. What I do is I offer myself as a bridge to this culture, to this understanding, to these definitions during very isolated times of the week when I have these workshops, or when I'm going on a show like this. Like, I'll have the energy during this time to do it. The other 80% of my energy goes towards parenting my kids about being Black young men in the society. Some people have to do it all the time. When you become an elected official or appointed to a position where it becomes part of your job, and that is not something I think I could do. So you're on a different level of exhaustion, right? Because I can retreat, and I do retreat. especially I'll go to my black, I'm actually half black and half Puerto Rican. So I do say my black part of my family because, that's where we joke, that's where we play, that's where we talk and make fun of the news and things, what we do in black families, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I refuel. And so, yes, I am able to talk to people when I feel like they're coming in from a positive direction, but I can only do it from certain times. That's all the energy that I have. And I learned that the hard way many years ago.
Well, I kind of learned that the hard way too. And so what I had to do consciously is to have a very close-knit set of girlfriends that I can simply be around, get that positive energy, know that they love and care about me, and that they'll just listen. I said on a call last week that a week and a half ago, I called Mary and I said, can you just pray for me? And she was about to say, what do you want me to pray for? And then she said, then she stopped herself and she said, okay, I'll just
say
pray.
okay, right?
Because she heard the tone in my voice. She heard me.
Period.
And so, yeah, and that's the kind of positive reinforcement that I think we all need. And I'm just speaking for myself right now. Before I get a bat or something and knock somebody upside the head. And I don't want to do that because my children would be without a mother.
So I do think
It's so good they wouldn't let you off like the white girl that, stole Nancy Pelosi's computer.
Well, yeah, and I told Mary and to get the other girls together and just collect bail money because I think it's going to happen. Yeah.
or a
I
jail
want to go fund me.
break.
Go fund me. Yeah, go fund me.
I'll
I
go.
think though there's a concept.
We're not gonna let that happen.
Please don't.
We're not gonna let that.
Because
you know what?
listen, we're like this, Monica.
That exhaustion, it hurts.
We're right
It
here.
physically hurts. Yes.
It's not here. It's right here. And this is real stuff.
Yeah.
And
You had
know
talked
what?
about,
Oh, go ahead, Monica.
And Black women get the brunt of it.
historically, factually, and statistically, you're absolutely right. And before the show started, we were talking about checking in on your strong friends. And I really believe that people being strong are just people who are really good at pushing down everything.
Yes.
Because I feel like if you're looking, those are your being strong, just be strong. We hear that rhetoric all the time. And what does that really mean? I like to think that my goal was not to be strong. My goal is to be peaceful. My goal is to be at peace. Because you don't need to check in they're cool. They're peaceful. They're doing okay. Somebody's just strong and they're just bulldozing through stuff. There's a problem.
I think there's some confusion too that might need some explanation to some people about what emotional labor is and why that's so exhausting. Because that's something that I think I observe, particularly among some of my white women colleagues and friends, is that they don't understand this whole concept of what emotional labor is and the drain that you're discussing.
I like to ask white people to imagine for a second a time in your life when you walked into a space and you were the only person of your color in that space. Number one, most people can't do that.
I can.
You can.
I can. I joined the Black Organization for Science Students when I was in high school.
Okay. And being in high school, that was probably really a brave experience, right?
What was that? Oh, I'm sorry. What was that phrase you used, Monica? Emotional what?
Jamie used that phrase, right? Emotional.
What did you say? Emotional what, Jamie?
Emotional labor. There's this emotional labor, and I see that a lot when I'm from rural Pennsylvania, which I'm open about, and I have some friends who I grew up with who say some things that are, I'm going to be very straightforward, really freaking racist, and they don't understand why it's racist. And I see my friends who are particularly women of color, trying to explain to people, and it's not, I'm going to say it to the white ladies, it's not your Black friend's job to explain racism to your racist white friends. I'm just stating it. Because there's a labor there. And I think that the intensity of this emotional labor of one, these experiences that you're going through all the time, and then two,
Right.
that people expect you brought it up earlier, to educate them. I mean, we pay teachers, last I checked. I mean, you ought to be putting out a Venmo every time you explain to one of the racist folks I went to high school what the heck's wrong with them. Not everybody I went to high school with, just a disproportionate number. And people ask why I stay friends with them, and it's because I don't think they're bad people. I think that they really just don't get it. And if we close that entire segment of society off, they're never going to get it, because it
Right.
does require some explanation.
Which is why we need the allies. We're talking about training white people to be allies. That's why we need the allies. We need white people to talk to white people about what is racism, how it affects people, how it affects society as a whole, because it's not a Black person problem. It's not a Hispanic person problem. It's not a Native American person problem. It is a societal problem that white people have created and that affects everybody. So that is why we need allies. Allies have to happen because we cannot do all the work.
So for instance, how to not be an ally. So when the white people in an area found out that they were going to prioritize for the vaccine a Black community that was hit very hard, the white people got up in arms about it because it was unfair. Now, I think it's unfair that Black people have to, be further down on the list when they are going to die first. So we're going to talk about fair.
That's real too.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a different grants. I think there needs to, can you explain maybe what we mean when we say equality versus equity? And I think that's a conversation.
Two different things.
But what I'm saying is that is not being an ally. An ally is saying, you know what? They do need it more. It has nothing to do with color. It has to do with who needs it. If they were white, would you be so angry? No. Then you know what? You're not being an ally. You're being racist.
Well, I think you hit on something important there too. Maybe Monica, you would talk to this too. We run it together. Monica and I are the founders of the anti-racist group for the county where my children go to school, because we have some problems, to put it mildly. But it feels like society is evolving to the point where you're either racist or actively anti-racist, and there is no in between, and there can't be. Would you say that's true in your experience?
100%. I don't understand how anybody could sit there and say, well, I'm not racist anymore, if you don't understand what racism is. Especially if you don't take the time to learn about it. You're definitely not anti-racist, and you are contributing to oppression when you're not learning about what is going on in the society and how some people are successful and some people are not. Has nothing to do with bootstraps anymore. And if we don't realize that now, out of everything that has happened, if we don't understand how police brutality works, if we don't understand how systemic racism works, how it opens up opportunities for some people and not others, then you don't care. Then you're not anti-racist and you're contributing to the problem. And by definition, if you are perpetuating racism, that is racist.
So 2 questions. Shelley has a question in the chat. Jamie, could you go into, or Dr. Grant, can you go into equality versus equity real quick? And if it's longer definition, then we can answer it at the end.
Aim?
One of the things that, I can speak to this in a corporate world, and I can only speak to this as a white woman. But when I talk about equality versus equity, you might have heard years ago when we talked about issues of race in the workplace, we talked about diversity. That was it. We had diversity groups and we tried to make groups diverse. And what we found out was that you could have a very diverse organization that is not inclusive. Meaning I've got the right number of people, and we see this in lots of organizations. It's very diverse at the lower levels. And when you get to the top of that pyramid, it's old white dudes. I like old white dudes. You saw the guy at the beginning of the thing. No, he's not old, but So this isn't bashing on the
She's
skills.
sorry.
Sorry,
Wherever you are.
dear. Sorry,
So
dear.
on. But so we're not bashing on that group, but there are systemic things that occur within organizations that cause that. You could have an entire organization of people who are not racist and still have systemic and institutionalized racism in that organization that results in certain groups being advantaged over others. We have data on that. So this isn't my opinion. This is
Right.
The math is what it is. And then we evolve to this idea of inclusion. Well, we need to be including everybody. And what we learned from that is it was a good first step, but just because people are included doesn't mean that we're listening to everybody and everybody's voice is being heard in the appropriate way. And then we get to this concept of equity. And to Grant's example, the difference between equity and equality would be everybody gets the same fair shot at that COVID vaccine. Equity is saying this particular community is higher risk and has been disproportionately impacted. And so in order to have things be equitable, we're going to focus the vaccine on this higher risk community. Equality would be 10% across the board. Equity is based on the risk and the way things are impacting different communities. And we also want to see that in workplace diversity programs, which is now why we now talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion versus just the diversity and inclusion, because if we don't create a setting that works for everybody, we could have, for example, a cultural norm where we treat everybody equally in that cultural norm, but it doesn't fit women or it doesn't fit the BIPOC community. So that's an equal organization, but it doesn't provide equitable opportunities. Did that answer the question for whoever posted it? And would my lovely colleagues like to add something outside from the diversity, inclusion, human capital strategy perspective?
You hit it.
And when we talk about equity, which was a different battle cry from the 60s, right? We were talking about equality. But I think now that we have more information about our the historical foundation of this country, because we thought we knew certain things, right? Some people knew more than others. But now, as the veil has been pulled back, right? And people are starting to really see what is going on, that equity piece, giving people what they need to be able to have the same opportunities as other people, has to do with that acknowledging the historical trauma that has taken place for Black and Indigenous people in this country. So when people have this real frame that enslavement was so long ago and the Trail of Tears was so long ago, they have no idea about historical trauma, how that continues to impact a group of people, both socioeconomically and emotionally, right, to this day. And so acknowledging this historical factors is a key to true equity. Okay, we're looking at this group of people of color, and we have to really understand that just because enslavement was 400 years ago does not mean that it's over. The effects of it are over. That historical trauma is real.
Because, great, movement, to this is historical trauma, whether it is your family, you were descended from slaves, or, your parents, grandparents were involved in the civil rights movement and the violence and fear around that, or I'm Jewish from the Holocaust. Trauma is carried not in our genes, but on our genes. So our DNA, genetically, I have the genes to be white. Monica, Mary, Veronica Victoria have the genes to be Black.
But
Vanessa.
It's Vanessa.
I know. But more than that, our genes are made so they can be transiently modified to react to our environment, because if they didn't, we wouldn't be able to react to being in an environment where, combat or,
So would an example of that, Grant, be, for example, I heard on a program today that they think sickle cell anemia evolved as a way for cells to resist different diseases that were in Africa?
No. That is something that's in the genetics that, even though it is a harmful trait, it was helpful because it made it harder when you had sickle blood cells for the
They said
organism.
malaria in particular. They
Yeah,
thought it fought
get
off
into it.
malaria.
So this instead is, so our DNA, that's our genetic material, is very stable. And because and it has to be so stable because we're such complex organisms. But what it can do is, in response to our environment, it adds on these chemicals to the DNA that either lets it make more of the, the gene, so we make more of those proteins, or make less. And the more of these methyl groups that you have on the DNA, the less that the genes will make. And some of the most profound things about this is that you can, through sperm and through the egg, pass this trauma that's on your genes to the next generation and the next and the next. And it gets worse and worse with each generation, so that, the genes that are responsible for responding to stress or developing our brains are not functioning properly. There's not enough of them, or they don't turn on when they're supposed to. And it gets harder and harder through the generations to respond in an appropriate manner to your environment. So, instead your stress levels go up, but they don't come back down. So when they talk about this emotional labor, on top of it, it's not just where someone who hasn't come from a family that has experienced this historical trauma, they can maybe, it's a stressful situation, it goes back down. But when it's constantly high, it's hard to make, find the differences between something that is, stressful but not really harmful, or something that is stressful and harmful and it's not going away. You don't have that kind of baseline where it's, oh, mommy's going to make it better and life is going to be fine. I'm okay. I'm not okay, and no one can make it fine.
So actually being born with a lower tolerance for stress. What I do like about that conversation, Jamie, that you read this morning, or that you were part of this morning, is that they were talking and highlighting geographical adaptations. The reason that we all look different and we come from different cultures. And one thing that I do want to highlight for anybody who's listening out there is I think that language is so important. And I love to make sure that when we're talking about historical aspects of Black and Brown people, that we always use the terms like they were enslaved people. I think it sets a mindset for people, because they didn't go over there and steal slaves, right? White people went over there and stole people. Right. And they enslaved them. And that is something that that is a word
Yes.
in terms that I hammer in my children's heads. Because in their textbooks, it still says things like slaves. It also still says things like Indians, right? Not talking about people from India, talking about Native Americans. So that terminology is so important, that, we're talking about people who are descendants from people who were enslaved, right? And so when you think about the amount of killing and torture and pain that it would take to enslave a human being, enslave a grown man, a grown woman, right? And then you pass that stress and trauma from one generation to the next. You have to imagine that 155 years ago, when slavery was abolished, quote unquote, how that wasn't that many generations ago. And so that generation coming out of enslavement, they didn't talk about it with their generation, with their children, or their children, or their children. So now we're maybe 4 or 5 generations from that. And so that definition, going back to that being strong, right? So that strength, that silence, that pushing down the pain is also part of our inheritance. Yeah. Versus dealing with it, back to what Vanessa was talking about, getting therapy.
So I apologize. You know what? Until that is brought up to people who don't have that same experience, your mindset isn't there. It was like the first,
Right.
and it's the first time I heard driving while black. I was like, oh my God. I know when I see a cop that's going to drive, you know, and could pull me over or something, I get worried about getting a ticket. I don't worry about losing my life. I don't worry that I'm going to jail.
And you know what? I remember the first, you think you remember the first time. I remember the very first time my sons heard that term coming from their mother. I remember that conversation, and the conversation being the look of, why is that something I need to be concerned about?
Oh, so
And
sorry.
it isn't, to be very clear, this isn't just young Black boys. This is, I mean, we think about what happened to Sandra Bland, who we don't want to let be forgotten during Black History Month. And I mean, there are so many names now. There's just so many. That was a traffic stop, a traffic stop.
And also not to confuse that with all the names that have existed since 1619.
Right.
Right.
But you know, it's, and I don't want to sound heartless. I'm just going to sound like a mom, and it's going to come out the way it comes out. What happened in 1619, what happened to a female happened to a female. I'm concerned about my two boys and my girl. And while we're all trying to make things better, we're really honestly trying to make things better because we want a better life for our children. And in that means that we want a better life for each other's children. So like when I'm talking, the history part is fine, but I'm just going to be honest because that's all I can be. I don't really care.
But unless you keep your kids.
I care about my son right now, who is on my mind, because he's at practice right now in the street.
Right, but unless we keep our kids in a bubble, everybody's mentality has to change.
Right.
Like, protecting our kids. Yes, absolutely, 100%. That's why we do what we do. Right? We all have literally, we have skin in the game.
Yep.
No pun intended. We have skin in the game. And so, but I can't, unless I follow him around just preaching to everybody who he comes in contact with. This is the only chance that we get.
This is it. And it's the fight. The crazy part is that we're still here. And the thing that I try to drive home, and I try to drive home, particularly when I'm talking to people who don't look like me, is that you need to understand. And I think there's a question in the comments directed at you, Vanessa, because we've had a lot of people comment. I just want you to know, before I say what I'm going to say, Monica, there were a couple people that agreed strongly with what you were saying about Black women earlier in the conversation. That's why my head was down a lot.
Okay, I can't see him.
So you might want to check it out afterwards.
Okay.
If you can't now, I'm kind of looking at my phone, so I'm seeing stuff. But I think Shelly has a question that she directed towards you, Vanessa. But
I'm trying to pull it up. I'm trying to pull it up.
When I talk to my friends that don't look like me, the conversation is, you have to understand that we are not too far removed from days where we had to sit at the back of the bus, from the days there was segregation in the schools. This is in our lifetime. I don't know how old you guys are, but I know it's in my lifetime, and so we are not that far removed from things going haywire again. So when you see people fighting for Black Lives Matter movement, when you see people talking about the racial disparities in America, when you see us talking about things, and for so long it's been, you're just exaggerating, it really isn't that bad. Oh, you just want a handout. Oh, you didn't. No. My mom and my grandmother had to sit at the back of the bus. They couldn't go certain places to eat. My mom is upstairs right now. Okay, she could not do some of the liberties and the things that I take for granted right now. And what we have come to in the last couple of years, particularly under the last administration, was that stuff trying to roll out all over again. When he out of his mouth, we're gonna make America great again, what exactly are you talking about? So when you see us protesting and different things and all of the different things that was going on these past 4 years, that's what this was about. Now, because something happened on the Capitol steps and there were white people involved and they're being threatened by people that look like them, now it's an issue. But if it was black people on the steps climbing all over buildings and stuff like that,
They wouldn't have made it to the steps.
They wouldn't have made it to the Capitol grounds, Mary. That's the point.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have made it from the Capitol South Metro station a half a block away to those Capitol grounds. That's the point.
Can you at least give me hanging on the window?
And go back to, it started at the Michigan protest where, because they were trying to make them wear masks.
Right.
I mean, you could see these guys screaming in armed forces' faces, and they were well prepared. They could have taken them, and they let them do this.
They stood there.
Imagine if
Open the
Black
door.
Lives Matter tried to kidnap a governor.
And I want to say this real quick, and I hope she don't mind me saying this. But when the 13 or 14-minute video came out during the trial I think it was last week. I try to forget. I think it was last week.
I was like, which trial?
The impeachment.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Where he got acquitted.
No, it was the
I'm
week
going to say,
before.
and I hope.
The kabuki dance, that was not a trial, that was a kabuki dance. Let's call it what it was.
I hope that she doesn't mind me saying what I'm getting ready to say. So if you're watching, please forgive me. But my daughter, I talked to her and she watched that video and she cried, Vanessa. She sat in her bed in her dorm room, a senior in college, and she cried. And she didn't cry because she was sad. And she didn't cry because it hurt her to her core. Because, is that her texting me? No. It hurt her to, but this needs to be said, you know, because rather she wants me to say it or not, she cried. And you know why she cried? Because she knew if it was Black people, it would not have went down like that. She said, Mom, it would have been blood in the streets. That's what she said.
They would have called the National Guard in the first place. There would have been cops crawling all over DC. There's no question there.
And you know, it's that kind of that's the stuff that we deal with when we're talking about the racial trauma. I don't know.
Well, because that creates a moral injury, right? Because what are morals? The difference between right and wrong. Period. It's not ethics, it's not values. So when you constantly see things that you know are wrong, yet nobody else is saying they're wrong, it rocks your world. It makes your entire essence of understanding shift. Because it is right if you're white. And that's not right.
There are lots of white people who know it's wrong, but they're still not willing to do anything.
Hey, Monica, you're a poet and you didn't know it. So I want to address Shelley's question in the chat. I'm not quite sure what she means. Maybe I'm wrong in translating her question, but she said, is focusing on Black history contributing to racism? And if I'm understanding her question, of course, I might say yes. I might say yes. And this is why I would say yes. Not that having Black history is causing more racism from Black people, because Black people are not racist. We can't be, okay? First of all, racism is a man-made construct created by men, okay? And racism implies, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, racism implies that structurally, if I'm in power, I can affect how you move in my company. and where you move inside my company. Okay. I've been a victim of structural corporate racism my entire career. So, and you know who's the worst? White women are the
Who, by
worst.
the way, have
White
benefited from
women, let me finish before I forget. White women
Exhibit
are
A. I'm just kidding.
are the worst in a corporate structure for Black women. Y'all can write me letters and at me, but it's true.
But let's, I mean,
Explain that further.
well, can I say something that I've observed? And Vanessa, is this what you're seeing? I want to ask. What I've observed is I think that women in the corporate world feel like there's a lot of tokenism for women. We're competing. There's only going to be, like, if there's 10 people, they're going to give us 2 slots for women, even if we've got 5 or 6 who's qualified going to RBGs. When there are 9, people would lose their heads if there were 9. But because women are socialized to believe in the corporate world that there's going to be only 2 slots, I have to wonder if what you're observing is white women who do benefit the most from affirmative action taking advantage of the institutionalized racism. There's only 2 spots. If I can get there just because I'm white, I'm willing to step on my sisters who are women of color.
Well, it's two things, Jamie, that I've seen over 30 years. It's that, and it's also the white men in the power structure that feel a 50-something-year-old Black woman who is clearly qualified and educated enough to be a director of blah, blah, blah. But my 32-year-old niece needs a job, so she's now the new boss.
I've seen that.
And you know,
Yeah, that's the story of corporate America.
And you know, and I know that happens. I saw it on my last 2 jobs ago.
I've seen
And
it.
so what makes that white man that's in structural leadership feel that his 32-year-old niece can do a better job than somebody's been doing the job and is qualified and is right in your face?
And they ask you to train them.
And they ask you to train them.
Don't laugh at me, Monica. You know I'm right.
It's true. Oh, I know.
No.
I know.
Let's take a step back. He doesn't think she's more qualified. He just doesn't care.
He doesn't.
You're right.
She is right.
And so those are the dynamics. It's either one or the other, Jamie, and it's probably 2 others that happen too. So, you know, it's yeah.
All of you, how many of you ever went for a position or know you was qualified for a position? They gave it to somebody else that was not qualified and they asked you to train them. Is that 5 times or you patting your back?
Let's be honest. Look at my personality. They wouldn't have the balls to do that.
I'm not qualified to train anybody. No.
Well, see, Grant, that's the problem right there.
Yeah.
I think you and I have similar sort of personalities in that we're strong presences, right?
Mhm.
But if you and I, 99 times out of 100, if you and I walk in the same room, apply for the same job,
Well,
that's real.
I know. What I was going to say is, honestly, I know that I would get picked. I never had that situation just because of the career that I'm in.
See, and I've never worked in corporate America.
okay, let me backtrack. Let me backtrack.
God
And
bless you.
Dr. Grant, real quick. Let me get you real quick.
Okay.
Okay. It's not because they don't have the balls to come to your face, because trust me, they ain't got the balls to come to mine either. But the difference is when I stand up for myself, I'm aggressive.
No,
You stand up
no,
for
no,
yourself.
Mary, no, Mary, correct
Hold it,
that.
hold it, 'cause
Correct
I had
that.
this fall to my face.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
Hold a second, let me finish. When I stood up for myself, I was called aggressive. When you stand up for yourself, you're called assertive. It's two different things.
So I've been called aggressive.
I get called aggressive all the time, doing the same things a white counterpart in my office would get called being assertive.
And that's
And-
very,
Well, and
very
I get-
typical.
Yeah,
And-
I get
and what-
coached to be more assertive, and
difficult.
I'm probably not, you know, it's the trouble of the angry Black women versus why the thing we see, you know, if you look at most corporate CEOs who are women are blondes. They're not natural blondes. We've talked about this before, but they think one of the reasons it works for women is because women who are seen as more childlike and diminutive can be more aggressive, can be more assertive. So Mary and I could be in the same meeting acting the exact same way. And I get coached all the time on how I should be more confident and be more assertive. And Mary would get told she's aggressive.
No, Mary would get called an angry Black woman.
That too.
Mary's trying to be nice. I'm not nice and PC anymore.
Well, and I get told I'm passionate.
Well, you know, I was told that to my face when I was working in New York for Fox Television. I was called aggressive and she was called assertive.
Now, I have been called intimidating before. I've been told I was
a man
intimidating.
That too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And let's be honest, a man would be called leadership skills.
Oh, absolutely. We know, yeah.
Well,
I've been told I write
see,
people.
but
I don't
see,
think
here's the thing we're missing too, ladies.
Mhm.
We're missing that it's not only the racism part, it's the sexism part. So I'm Black, a woman, and over 50.
Mhm.
So if I were to go and try to get a job right now in corporate America, I already got 3 strikes against me. That's real.
You could change the birthday though, because you probably got another 10 years till you look anywhere near that age. But go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, she looks way younger than I do.
So
I look like the old lady in this
but
discussion.
but here,
I'm the only one with like neckline.
but here is what I want my white girlfriends to know, and I love y'all. I love y'all. But here's what I want you to know. The white privilege is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And if my white girlfriends, my non-Black girlfriends and my white girlfriends, if you guys don't understand how we are viewed just going to the grocery store, then you need to know. You need to know. Check on your Black friends because we're struggling out here, guys. And I hope you guys are listening. Whoever's on this thing, listen to me. This is serious. Being an ally means if I'm walking in a store with Jamie and the store security guard starts following me and not following Jamie, I expect Jamie to jump out and say, what the F are you following my friend for? We are in here together. That's an ally.
Right.
So if you're not willing to go to those links, then you're not my friend.
Oh,
And you're not an ally.
yeah.
And you're not an ally.
I agree. I mean, that's something I would do innately for anyone. You know, I don't think of it as if anyone was following one of my friends, I don't care what color they are, I'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? What are you doing? Why aren't you following
And
me?
that's how it should be.
Yeah.
There's an element though where we have to be willing to be in an uncomfortable space in so many different ways. If you want to be an ally, I have to be in an uncomfortable space of dealing with my own implicit bias. I have to admit that they're there, and it's hard within me and be in that uncomfortable space. I have to be willing to take a risk. You have to be willing to stand up to people who you love and respect and call them out when they're displaying bad behaviors. Frankly, in my opinion, calling out the security guard in the store is easier than calling out your friends. And that's a harder conversation, but we have to have those conversations. And it means we have to sit in an uncomfortable space. And at least for me, it's been, what I try to take this from an angle of is, I know I have implicit bias too. I'm a work in progress. I'm working on this. I have internalized misogyny as well that I'm working on.
I got to give another shout out to the historical implications, even though Mary doesn't care, because I think that
I don't care.
because I think, but no, but really, when people, especially white people, can sit there and say, why do I think like this? Like, there has been lots of studies that show that having our trainings about implicit bias are not effective. Yes, okay, I have implicit bias. So then you spend all your time thinking about all the negative thoughts. But when white people understand, why do I think like this? Because being white in this, you have to understand, you have an entire nation that's coast to coast, brown people. 100% brown people who are now 1% of that entire nation. When you, as a white person, can't sit down and go, gee, why do I think like this? Why do I think that I'm scared of this person? Why do I have implicit bias when this person wants? How can you not put into factor in the fact that people came over here to kill and to take over a land, and you are benefiting from all of that, and it's all a mind game.
And
It
we
is all a
continue
mind
to
game.
benefit it. It isn't just the history, though.
That's the
We
privilege.
continue to pass policies that benefit white people over people of color. And I put a link in the chat. This is not good overall for our country for a variety of reasons, but if we could eliminate systemic racism from our economy, it would raise the GDP 4 to 6%.
Oh.
Think about that. I mean, I'm a labor economist, so it would raise our GDP. Like, this is so entrenched in our society that because we lose multi-generational wealth and all of this, it's 4 to 6%. That's how much racism costs us. Not to mention the human costs, of course, to our souls are what's the most important. But the fact that we can measure this should really be striking to people.
And we can get there. You know, and me being half Puerto Rican, I identify a lot with being indigenous, even though I'm not indigenous American, indigenous Caribbean. And so understanding, even when our President Biden was standing there, he's like, we had a lot to deal with for the past 400 years. In my head, I was thinking, what about the past 526 years? Because, you know, that's how long white people have been benefiting off this land. And so you don't see a lot of Native Americans now, and I don't want to speak for the whole entire population, but from what I know, who I speak to, and what I read, people who are still going, well, you know, we want our land. They do want land back. That's a whole other conversation. But really talking about the fact that, yes, we can be this nation. We need to change the Constitution. That's a whole other topic too. But we can be this nation where everybody who can be here and benefit, and we can grow our GDP, and we can do all these things, and we can be this land where people can be different religions and be different colors, and everybody has the same opportunity. And all Native American people want are, number one, their land, their reparations, right? And they want that representation. Yeah. Talking about, you know, our Congress, our Senate still being, you know, people who are 70 plus white men. There's no representation. It is so important that to understand, to keep in line what Mary was talking about too, about right here, right now, we can be there. But it's going to take people to understand, and that white privilege to be understood and squashed.
One of the best questions I saw that we posted in our group, Monica, I don't know if you saw it, was particularly for the white folk, when you first had a Black teacher.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, it wasn't until college. I had all white teachers until I got to university.
Oh, I did too. And I grew up in New Jersey, so where you think there would be more diversity.
Most of us here are in the same area, correct? So for this particular area, because we're gonna wrap up probably in a couple minutes, but I wanted to really home in on something really quickly. For where we are right now, in this county, and I want you all to really, because I know Jamie and Monica, you guys head up a different group, like with Loudoun County Public Schools, dealing with some issues. And Vanessa, we know that you are spread across a couple different realms. How do we move? How do you think that we as a county can move forward? And how do you think as a country we can move forward? What are if you could name two things that you think we could do right away to start moving the conversation and move forward as a county and as a nation, what would they be?
Education and accountability.
Yes. Yes. And more, and just digging a little bit into what Monica said, it's really going to take parents and teachers and elected officials and other contributors to the community to do the work, whatever that looks like. If your kids have never had a Black teacher, like Jamie grew up, if your kids have never had a Black teacher or an Indigenous teacher or a teacher of color, then you need to find some organizations or groups, like Dr. Grant said she joined a group in high school. Talk to your kids about, or find a group and put your kids in it. Don't talk to your kids about nothing.
Right.
They live under your roof. You make them do it. Right? Yep. Oh, I gotta ask Johnny if he wants to do that. You and Johnny need to sit down somewhere. Okay?
Exposure. You have to
children.
intentionally expose your children.
Get your children out of the bubble and put them in groups where that is DEI. Find a group, okay? And then let them experience what America looks like. America, you know why everybody in Loudoun County is so upset? Because it don't look like the old Loudoun County anymore.
That's it right there.
It's blacking and it's browning. Fast.
Very fast.
Okay.
Especially in our schools.
And we're not even talking about these people, like I heard this week.
There's some real ugliness.
Talking about these people, and all they say is, I don't know if I want that kind of person in my neighborhood, or if I don't know if I want that kind of school in my backyard. What do you do? What do you do with crap like that? What do you do with it? So all we can do as leaders, as parents, as teachers, as educators, is find something in your community to get involved with and do that.
And the other part,
I posted a link on how to be a better ally as a white person. And if you look around, there's also for people of color and Indigenous folks, there is also a mental health resource page that's in the link that has how to find, a psychologist, psychiatrist, mental health professional that's also of color, or that is someone who, is well entrenched in and understands racial trauma.
I also put a link to my nonprofit's webpage in there, because we do have BIPOC ally training. We have one coming up on Thursday. Anybody can come. Anybody from any background can come. So if you go under services, all of the upcoming workshops are on there. So that's a live in-person, or not in-person, virtual training. But what I was going to say too, to add to what Vanessa was saying, is yes, that piece, the exposure/education piece, has got to be there. We can't just keep living in a bubble and acting like we want to be inclusive. The other part has to be the accountability. There has to be a place where people are listened to when they experience racism and microaggressions, especially when there are no people of color in that the hierarchy, right? There has to be a policy and procedures for these things in place to deal with racism, just like there was to deal with feminist issues, right? Just like to deal with issues with people with disabilities. These things can happen. You can be called to the carpet and dealt with this stuff.
And
And here's the other.
education. Oh,
Go ahead.
please, go ahead,
No.
Vanessa.
Okay, sorry. Just one last thought. I know we got to wrap up, but I really want people, like Monica said, to, and all of us have been saying this, but I really want people that say that they didn't know. Vanessa, I didn't know, or I didn't realize, or I never heard of that. I want y'all to get together and get some education. Educate yourself. Because if you don't know that racism exists in America, I want to know what rock you've been under. If you are going around saying you don't see color, I need you to stop it. It's ignorant.
There's actually a whole banner on Netflix about it. Black Stories.
Yeah, and I put some things in the link. I put 2 things in. One article about, this is Black History Month, about ways to celebrate your Black History Month with kids, tying this in. And there's also an article in there for white parents on Black History Month and how we approach this with our children, which is something that I found very helpful because, we talked about how I grew up. Didn't know how to traverse this. I've had to educate myself. And to an earlier point, it's not my Black friend's job to do the emotional labor to educate me when there are articles and resources out there that I can read on my own. That way, and I still sometimes have questions, I admit that, but at least I'm coming at that from, I put in the time and the labor myself. Because if you're not willing to do that, you don't really care.
Right.
I found that out the hard way.
You don't really care.
And what we're talking about here, it affects everyone. It affects everyone, not just us, but we're trying to tell you what we experience. We're Americans too, don't forget that.
I just want to say I like Shelly.
And to the white ladies,
thank you, Mary.
Shelly is on this chat, but I like
Shelly.
Yeah. To the white ladies, you're going to have Black and brown grandbabies or great grandbabies. This is
First
the way
of all,
America is now. Let me just state that. So we got to get our shit together. Pardon me, white ladies, because this is happening. The world is becoming infinitely more diverse and inclusive, and this is a great thing, unless you're racist. And particularly if you're racist and you don't know it, it's going to be a much harder journey than if we take this on.
And understand that, you want to make sure your white baby is safe. One of the best ways you can do it is making sure that Black babies and Indigenous babies and everyone is safe.
Right.
Because as long as it is a schism in our society, there will be no safety.
Yeah.
Good end. That's a great end to a wonderful conversation. I can't say enough. Every time I come before you guys, I learn more. You're a sad person if you can't learn.
Right.
And if you're the smartest person in your circle, it's time to find a new circle. That's my thing,
Yeah.
So
Jamie's in my circle. I'm not the smartest.
Grant's way smarter than I am. I freely admit that.
It's great. And it never fails that, people invite people to be part of the conversation. That always adds to the conversation. Dr. Grant, thank you for inviting Monica to the conversation this week. Monica, I always say this every week to our guests because we've always had such wonderful people here. We haven't had anybody I said, nope, I don't want to come. I don't want them to come back. I know one day it'll probably happen, but it hasn't happened yet, Vanessa.
Thanks for coming.
Well, yeah, thanks. No, you're not coming back. But Monica,
Mary hits the block button on Facebook.
Well, I have this no button.
No. Oh. No.
Mary could
Make
not
it
block
trader
me.
song.
She can't block me enough. I'm on like I follow her around Facebook.
So thank you, Monica, for taking time out of your night tonight.
My pleasure.
We really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica,
We
and
will
thank
be
you for your
back.
support in our Facebook group.
Absolutely.
Sure to go to Monica's organization.
Can you tell?
And you can
tell
sign up
people
for
what
those
you do?
events through Eventbrite. You can do it through it's Eventbrite, right?
You can do it
Sorry.
through Eventbrite, or all the events that are on Eventbrite are also on the page. I like when people go to the page because they get to learn a little more about me and the nonprofit that we're working with. That is my nonprofit. But it's
Can you tell
Reset.
us about that?
Sure, it's reset.org, resetnow.org. Reset stands for Resilient Experiences for Children Exposed to Trauma, and it's really about giving support, making mental health conversations normal conversations, making conversations about trauma and resilience normal conversations. But right now, we're really highlighting talks about the impact of racial trauma on youth, BIPOC allyship, racial microaggressions, and then really making sure that people understand about ACEs, the science of trauma. And so every week we have a workshop. You can find all of those workshops under our services page. I also am a licensed master's degree social worker, and I have on that services page a link to my LLC, which is Buka Joy Counseling, where we offer non-clinical, culturally competent counseling. And so that's all on
Can
there
I
also.
stop you, Monica, though?
Yes.
For folks who don't work with this term, what do we mean by culturally competent? Because that's one of the things that's near and dear to my heart in the work that I do, even done some work with
Sure.
some healthcare organizations, and we're looking for culturally competent, healthcare culturally competent. What does that mean to you when it's culturally competent?
It means that you don't have to explain your culture or what your experiences are to that counselor. Because when you come in, they see you, they see who you are and what you are, your culture you represent, and they understand the cultural implications and what's going on in your life. It's not just clinical, what's in the DSM. They're not looking just to diagnose you, they're looking at your whole societal impact that has on your life. And so you don't have to re-explain to that. And it doesn't always have to be a Black person. There are white therapists also, white counselors also, who are culturally competent. But it's important when you're looking for somebody, especially when you're dealing with problems with specific problems with racial trauma, racism, things that you're experiencing at work, you probably want to look for someone who is culturally competent. So you don't have to re-explain to them what racism is, what microaggressions are, how you're feeling hurt. So as soon as you say something, be like, yes, I know, continue.
So you're sending me the Karens, is what you're saying.
Not that. I know literally nice people named Karen. But yes.
I went to graduate school with one of the nicest people I've ever met. Her name is Karen.
But yeah, so it's non-clinical, so we don't go by the DSM. We do not diagnose people. It is culturally competent counseling.
Much needed.
Yes, it is.
I'm glad you said that. So that's in the back of my head, so that when we have something else, we know who to bring to the table. Definitely. But I just want to thank everybody for being part of the conversation. We have one more Saturday this month, I think, and next month we will be having our Women's History Month. So we'll be dealing with lots of women issues. Vanessa, do you want to tell the people what's going to happen the first Saturday? Are you ready to do that a little bit?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
So the first Saturday in March, I think it's the 5th, we are going to discuss domestic violence through COVID and other matters surrounding domestic violence. And our special guest is my homegirl right here in Leesburg, Miss Lori Carter of the Beautiful Movement. So she has, Lori's going to bring the fire. She's going to bring the pain, and she's going to talk about her experience as a victim of domestic violence and how she overcame. And she's also going to talk about her nonprofit called The Beautiful Movement and how that started. And it's going to be just bring your tissue, but it's going to be informative, and I think it's going to help a lot of women.
I'm loving it. And We will have some other topics dealing with women and issues. I know it's Women History Month, but we've got to deal with some of the issues that women deal with so that we could make history, right? I almost said amen because I felt like I was getting ready to say something. But I also want to deal with the topic of single moms next month also. So that's going to be, not sure which Saturday it's going to be. I know that will probably be a Saturday I share my story with you all, but I want to have some other single mothers involved. So if you're part of the group and you want to share your story, ladies that are here tonight, if you have a story or you know someone that wants to share a story during that month that will make good topics, please get back to me and let me know, okay?
I have a good one for you. I'll reach out to her.
Okay.
For single mom. For the single mom show.
Okay, cool. So with that being said, adios, muchachas.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Grant.
Go check on my
Bye,
puppy. He's
everybody.
about to tear up my house. Ladies,
Thank you,
Yeah, my
ladies.
boyfriend's here, but he's
yeah, she
asleep.
got to get to her man. That's a whole nother story.
I do. My man is here.
Yes, we know. He flew from Seattle for you. We know.
Bye, guys. Ladies, hang out for
Bye.
a second.